6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I got it.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely
Ready?
Making review. Making review. Making review.
Say 6,
6,
5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to episode 24 of Rank and Review. This is your host and random Canadian, Larry Parsons, and this week with my guest Lee Beckman, we're going to discuss 6 movies on the topic of You So Crazy. And this is a special episode. This is a director masterclass because we have 6 celebrated directors tackling the subject of insanity. So it's a little different. They're not all horror movies, but they're all dark and they're all mad. So without further ado, please enjoy episode 24. And be warned, there are spoilers. There are definitely spoilers. And there is definitely coarse language. Thank you so much for listening to Rank and Review. All right, so we're rolling. Welcome to another episode of Rank and Review, and welcome to my returning guest, Lee Beckman, with 2 N's.
It's an honor to be here.
So again, you chose this category, and this is sort of a first of a couple of sort of special subtopics in here. I think that there's a lot of horrific elements to these movies that we're talking about, but they're not according to Hoyle horror movies.
No, in fact, I probably think maybe 1, 2 of them are actual horror films.
But they all explore madness, and the
Yeah.
other thing they all have in common is that there's sort of a director masterclass here.
Well, there are a lot of things in common with these films, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah. But this is sort of the subset. I think it's like we're calling it You So Crazy, but this is also a director masterclass.
There are some very, very amazing filmmakers who actually have made some amazing films. In
Like
here.
last time you were here when we did Creature Features, we compared a no budget movie like
Yeah.
The Roost with a
Yeah.
big budget movie like
Yeah.
the 2010
Yeah.
thing. And in this one, I mean, we're going from different eras, different time frames, but
Yeah.
they're all fairly big budget studio pictures made by well established,
Yeah.
well liked
Yeah.
genre directors.
So one of them is actually it was his first movie, but yeah.
Truth be told, I guess Shallow Grave is a low budget feature.
But it's so well done.
Yeah.
And
Memento is nowhere near as big a production as Nolan would go on to.
yes.
But,
Oh, yes. And by that means it's one of his cheaper movies. in
yeah.
fact.
Anyway, so what drew you to the topic? Was it the madness or was it the directors?
It was the directors right off the bat. I mean, when you've got David Lynch, David Fincher, Michael Mann, Danny Boyle, and
Scorsese.
Martin Scorsese,
Yeah.
you just kind of go, wow. Like, see, these are some of my favorite movies of all time. And some films I know for sure that we're probably going to clash on somewhat. So.
Yeah.
That's what attracted me to it, is really the directors. There's some really good movies in here.
No, I don't think this is the episode where you and I go 6 for 6, but
No.
maybe we'll surprise each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well-
there's some amazing performances in some of these movies.
Let's name the movies that we are going to talk about. I have the 80s sort of establishment of Lynch. I guess
This
he
is the movie
made
that-
waves with Eraserhead,
Yeah.
and
But this is the film that made him.
this is the first truly Lynchian film. Like Dune and Elephant Man are interesting, but they're not really as Lynchy as
Yeah.
some of the other Lynch films to come.
Yeah.
Blue Velvet is quintessential David Lynch.
Yes, it is.
We have Danny Boyle's first directorial effort, Shallow Grave.
Yeah, a very good twist on the old Hitchcock thrillers.
Yeah, and to introduce the world not just to Danny Boyle, but to Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
That was the first time I remember seeing him in anything.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think of also Christopher, say his name, Larry?
Eccleston? I believe?
Eccleston. I've been saying it wrong. Christopher Eccleston. I think this is also his big debut, at least North America. I'm trying to think other movies he was in before that.
Yeah.
But 28 Days Later came after.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Anyways.
We got Manhunter.
Yeah.
Michael Mann's Manhunter, which was remade into a movie called Red Dragon.
Yeah.
It's the precursor to
it's the first
Silence of the Lambs.
It's the first Thomas Harris novel done for the first time. I mean, It has that.
It boldly states right here on the back of the DVD case that it is a superior film to Silence of the Lambs, which I would argue. But yes, Christopher Nolan's film Memento.
Yep.
Guy Pearce, Carrie-Anne Moss, Joe Pantoliano. Good cast and high concept.
Does it introduce the world to Christopher Nolan?
Yeah, my buddy Stephen Tobolowsky's in there.
And what's the guy? I'm of course I'm not going to blank on the Canadian actor's name.
Callum Keith Rennie.
There's two of them. There's Callum Keith Rennie and Carrie-Anne Moss.
Yeah.
But Callum Keith Rennie is awesome in this very limited role.
Martin Scorsese's one of his more recent films called Shutter Island. With his frequent collaborator, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
And, of course, we have Fight Club from David Fincher from 1999, a really rough and tumble macho picture, if ever there was one.
It's a very disturbing movie, but brilliantly told. It's polarizing.
Yeah.
It's supporting and talking about certain issues that I think a lot of people would find uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So but it's good. Anyways, onwards and upwards.
Is there anything you want to say more about the directors or about Psychos in general, or shall we just
I think really we should get to it. I mean, I could talk about the comparisons and how they reference not only Hitchcock but Edgar Allan Poe. All these films are about identity. That's the one thing I really got about it. You know, on a whole, all these characters are searching for their identity at some point. But I've said too much.
I do think that we do look at insane people. In all of these movies, there are either one or several characters that we get to know well who are mentally ill.
Yes.
And to see a really, really game directors sort of tackle sort of a fascinating concept like that shall prove interesting.
Yes.
Let's do it.
Beneath the surface of the perfect small town, a dark world awaits.
Are you the one that found me here?
You know anything?
Well, one name that keeps coming up is this woman singer.
I'll bet someone could learn a lot by getting into that woman's apartment.
I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert.
Well, it's for me to know and you to find out.
What are you doing in my apartment?
I close my eyes.
Are you a bad boy?
What you see here with Blue Velvet is sort of the first time the loud and proud art house world of Lynch sort of gains favor with everybody.
Yeah.
It was fairly successful theatrically, and it was very, very respected critically.
Yeah, but it took a while for it to be respected really. Well, to make its money back. When it first came out, it actually sank.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, no, it spent months. It is actually sort of the classic definition of a sleeper hit because
it slowly turned around.
It slowly turned around. But, at that point, Dino De Laurentiis was about to fire David Lynch. He had made Dune and he'd made Blue Velvet for him. So he was very much on the outdoor, and then all of a sudden Blue Velvet just sort of took off. But it took months.
You'll see a lot of things in this movie that were quintessentially David Lynch in that the cast that he'll return to again and again.
Yeah.
Laura Dern, Kyle MacLachlan, most obviously, Dean Stockwell.
There's a lot of supporting...
a lot of people that you will see in a lot of Lynch's work, and a lot of themes and a lot of vibes that are similar to that. The Baldamenti sort of jazzy score and sort of the persistent, pervasive feeling of uncomfortableness.
Yeah, yes. If I was a film teacher and I was teaching students about film allegory, I would definitely show them some Lynch films because, especially with Blue Velvet, he's not subtle with his this is what this movie is really all about. With the ear on the ground and underneath all the sort of sweet Americana is this evil darkness. I mean, it's a great way. His visual allegories are beautifully done in Blue Velvet, and that's one thing I love about it.
Well, I will give it this. I understood where he was going for in this, and I can't always say that with Lynch. A lot of times I am left utterly baffled.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Whereas in this case, I get it. I get it to a degree where it's almost pushing it. Like, I get when we do the slow pans, it's a very, sort of a beautiful, beautiful green, rich suburban environment.
Yeah.
And then we pan in closer and closer, and we see the ugly bugs and insects underneath. You know, the closer you look, the more horrible things you will find.
Yeah.
And he establishes that as a theme right away, and it does kind of hit me over the head.
Yeah.
There's no subtlety to it, but at least it's a tangible, I can hang on to that, I get the theme that you're going to ring in this movie.
Yeah.
And that is at least a lever into this movie.
Yeah.
But basically, to try and outline the plot, a basic everyman, played by Kyle MacLachlan, after
very
finding...
young Kyle MacLachlan.
Yeah. Almost looks like he's fresh out of high school. He's just a baby-faced Kyle MacLachlan.
Yeah.
Finds an ear on his walk home one day.
Right.
And he takes it to a quirky local sheriff and basically starts to investigate it in his own creepy way.
Yes.
His investigation involves some home invasion.
Yeah.
It involves, sort of spying and in some S&M and meeting a lot of really creepy people.
There's a great line, I think, that sums up the Kyle MacLachlan character in Blue Velvet, and it actually comes from Laura Dern, who is also 18 or 19-year-old when this movie is made. And that line is, "I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert, because really he's both."
He's a voyeur.
Oh, yeah.
He spends a lot of time in a closet watching terrible shit go down.
Yeah, even though, I mean, it's a choice made of panic, he does keep on looking, and voyeurism is, one of those themes that runs throughout Blue Velvet, so yeah.
There's a lot of really disturbing and memorable images in the movie.
Yes.
And I'll give it that as a plus.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of disturbing and memorable performances. Dean Stockwell, who's got a rich catalog of eccentric performances,
gives one that I sort of kind of go, what is the point of this? I mean, it is hypnotic, and
he's all out, and it would be a very self-conscious, sort of uncomfortable performance to give.
Yeah.
But clearly, the performance of the movie is given by the late great Dennis Hopper.
Yeah.
With his nitrous gas container and his completely insane, manic, and frankly terrifying portrayal.
Well, see, that's one thing that Blue Velvet also does very, very well. Is it's been a while since I had a general, dread and feeling of fear, and Blue Velvet provided, mainly because of Dennis Hopper.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that is actually a very well thought, well created character brought to sheer life by Dennis Hopper.
And it was in a period of his life where he wasn't 100% on the rebound yet. I think
He'd just gotten out of rehab, actually.
Hoosiers was sort of the movie that sort of brought him back into the focus and made people think, we can work with Dennis Hopper again. He's out of the clouds.
Yeah.
But this movie still has a percentage of crazy in it. I think that he's sort of letting it off the leash here in this portrayal.
Yeah.
Totally hateful and totally cartoonish character.
Yeah,
I don't know if I believe this as a real person, but I do know that it does terrify and intimidate me watching
I think it's the person on this can totally exist. I don't know. I agree it's a caricature. Like he's at one level the entire movie, and that's...
He belongs in Lynch world.
Yes.
This doesn't feel real world to me. This feels Lynch world, but it feels that good, terrifying sort of level of Lynch. And again, I keep on repeating myself, but I just wish Lynch had made an honest horror movie in his career. I wish he had the focus and the desire to actually tell an honest, scary story well. Because almost all of his films will have these scenes or these moments that are so uncomfortable.
Lost Highway's a horror film.
So horrifying that by themselves they work really well on the basic sort of nerve-shattering way. But they sort of stand out in a movie that otherwise have a lot of scenes that kind of overstay their welcome. I think that this is true for Blue Velvet, but it is more true of subsequent films. I like Blue Velvet enough to give it a positive review. I don't like it so much to be enthusiastic about it.
See, for me, also a love of classic cinema like Hitchcock. You can tell that the man made this movie is very much educated in the art of film. There's so much attention to detail, and that's one good sign of amazing directors. Their handprints are all over it. Where we are here, I mean, especially watching Hitchcock, I got definite connections of Vertigo and Rear Window, obviously. But even the scene where he, he's trapped in the closet or he's walking down the hallways, the set design in this film, it's well thought out and well done, and that's clearly all Lynch as well. But
there
also
is
the
a
lighting.
precision to his films.
There's too many. Yeah.
This is obviously exactly what he wanted on film, but I always stop short of calling him sort of a technical genius in that, I mean, he's really good at getting what is in his head on the screen, I think. Mm-hmm. But as far as communicating what it means to any other level, he doesn't seem interested in at all. And again, watching his subsequent catalog, I think, supports my argument.
Yeah. I mean, the set design, the music in this movie, I can't remember who did the music.
Angelo Baldamenti,
Angelo Baldamenti, yes.
Collaborator.
Yeah. The music is really well done. The lighting, like I said, and it's all, that's all planned and done well. The performances are uneven in Blue Velvet. It's true. I'm not a big fan of Kyle MacLachlan, to be perfectly honest. And
it's a little flat.
Yeah, I think with the right director, he can be cast well. Laura Dern also is very, very young. I mean, she's definitely pretty to look at, and it's a very sweet natured performance.
I will say that Laura Dern grew into an amazing actress.
Yes.
She was not quite there yet in this movie.
Yeah, but
they do seem like kids to me.
Yeah, I mean, and they are.
They're Hansel and Gretel in this really fucked up wilderness, right?
Yeah, but both Dennis Hopper's quite amazing in this film, but also the actress
Isabella Rossellini. Yeah, I did want to talk about her character, and I think this is the most troubling, problematic, and I guess interesting thing to talk about in this movie.
It's the one criticism I have of the film, and are we going to just get to that particular scene right off the bat, and that's the S&M scene.
Yeah.
Legend has it, and this is why Blue Belt kind of went a notch down on my belt, because I've often wondered about his attitude towards sexuality and violent sexuality, or at least, trying to be shocking just for the sake of shocking. But legend has it, they were filming that particular scene. And it's a pretty wild scene, the S&M scene where, eventually Isabella Rossellini and Kyle MacLachlan eventually have sex after this really long, demented, seduction that's gone on. But legend has that as they were filming that scene, and it's quite an intense scene, that David Lynch was kind of giggling like a little schoolboy right behind the camera, going, thinking it was quite hilarious. And that kind of told me that he wasn't treating that particular subject with enough respect. It was kind of done just more for a sense of humor. And
there's sleaze here. There's a bit of sleaziness to it.
Well, it's just more, I just got the impression that he kind of thought that, let's throw in the theme of S&M just to be shocking a little bit, but I'm not. It doesn't really properly explore it, and it can be I'm sure is a very interesting topic.
It is, I think, it is a weird Lynchian thing to put in the movie to make the movie weird and Lynchian.
Well,
if they'd have tethered this all strictly to the Dennis Hopper's character, and this is what he needed to get off, this is the kind of violent, aggressive act that he needed to sort of wrestle his demons, it would be horrifying, but at least we could tether it to something. Yeah. But Rossellini is into it.
Yeah.
And that sort of adds another layer to it. Now, I'm not Mr. Into the World of Kink guy. I don't really understand the psychology of either party in this exchange. Yeah. So I watch it with just a wonder, a sense of wonder and horror. I don't engage with it, but it's very Lynchy to have a weird, kinky sexual angle to the movie. Yeah. And as to what that plays in or how that feeds the theme or the story or the rest of the movie, I don't know that it necessarily does. Yeah. I know that we see Isabella Rossellini in scene after scene of sort of sexual torture and humiliation, and we see her, wandering around beaten and naked for large portions of the movie. Yeah. And the fact that, Lynch would be tittering behind the camera while this was going down, I think, again, furthers my argument that a lot of his movies are sort of dressed up art wankery.
Yeah.
This was maybe interesting because it was his first and one of the most celebrated dressed up art wankeries, but I still think I find it guilty.
Bold words, man.
I find it a little bit guilty of it. I mean, I am in the minority, and I said the same things when we reviewed Mulholland Drive. I said the same things, and I'm sure will be rebuffed by a lot of the Lynch fans. I think this is a much better and more interesting movie than Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
But I still, again, this is like a C review. It was C minus sort of review for me. I just don't meld well in the Lynch world. Like, I like movies with sexuality in them. I like movies with intense violence to them. Yeah. So, that doesn't offend me by itself. But there's something about the way Lynch handles it. Yeah. And his... and again, I say this in a way to his credit, his ability to make you consistently uncomfortable while you're watching his movies. Yeah. Like, you feel this icky, like, not quite gag reflexy, but, like, there's an unpleasantness to it, which, I mean, hurts the rewatchability, I think, to any movie. But the fact that this is his wheelhouse, this is his bread and butter, this uncomfortable ick world is where Lynch exists. Yeah. Makes me, I almost put him in, the same category of, like, Larry Clark or Larry Clark, again, it's
Larry Clark is that, almost an exploitation.
But as far as there's always got to be an element to his movies of ugly sexuality or violence. Yeah. And that that's his forte. Yeah. The other guy I have to mention, the nymphomaniac, Lars von Trier. Yeah. Always about ugly violence and sexuality specifically towards women, and it's handled in such a way as to just not over and above being an unpleasant experience watching. Just you question the psychology behind it. Yeah. Do I take baggage into a David Lynch movie, and did I take baggage into this one? I guess maybe I did. Yeah. But I think this is an interesting movie. Yes. But I don't think it's a great one.
Really? See, once again, I think there's far too many elements that work. I agree that you can take out the S&M stuff. I mean, keep the scene where, Frank has that, gas thing and, Daddy wants to fuck scene. Yeah. That leave that there. That's disturbing and demented enough. But you really don't need the S&M scene. It doesn't elevate the character. You could argue that, it gives a certain psychological dimension to the character, but you don't need it. I remember Roger Ebert's review of it, and he was very much offended by it, which is interesting because apparently he was also into S&M personally. Hmm. But, he seemed deeply offended by it, and it doesn't really offend me, but it's such an interesting theme that you could have made a different movie about it.
Offend isn't the right word, even necessarily. I mean, I get what he's going for. It's not my world. It's the Lynch world, the Lynchian thing that people tend to embrace. Very rarely do I catch the wave on it. This is another case of that.
Well, like I said, I felt general fear and dread. And it was not just from, Dennis Hopper's, character and his storyline. It's, it was, the mood. Once the Kyle MacLachlan characters went deeper and deeper into Lynchian world, there's a general fear and dread that stays with you for quite some time. And it takes a really good filmmaker to do that. Considering of all the films I've seen in my very short life in a lot of ways, I can still look at something like Lost Highway or even Blue Velvet, and there's some things that the feelings of dread that come from this movie still. And I think that says something to the power of the movie.
They are different, and that does make them stand out, and it does make them memorable. Yeah. But does it make them good? This question is asked of many artists. Yeah. Is Lynch trying to entertain his audience or himself? And both. Or is there a way that he can do both? Yeah. I don't know.
But, he had those scenes with Dennis Hopper first shows up, and even up to the point to the S&M scene, they're well done. Like, everyone goes full bore. It's a well written, well acted scene, or scenes, I should say, plural. It's just unnerving and powerful. You don't really need much of the Dean Stockwell character, Frank, or what was it? Who was so suave?
Yeah, he was a bizarre and interesting element.
But you don't need that long lip syncing scene. You kind of go, okay. Yeah. But I don't know. I really enjoy it. I still consider it American classic, but you may differ.
Intruder entered through the kitchen sliding door.
Nationwide victims.
Yeah, this is Will Graham of the FBI.
One killer.
This is what the subject's teeth look like.
Michael Mann.
Yep.
Interesting director.
Yep.
People love him.
Yes.
I like a lot of his movies.
Yes. You don't love him?
But once again, whereas I'm defender of people like Stuart Gordon, I think that there is a percentage of snobbiness to some Michael Mann joints, as it were. I love his Last of the Mohicans.
Yep, that's a really good movie, and it's in a lot of ways is sort of a very un-Michael Mannish movie.
Yeah,
he does love his sort of, I would call them sort of film noir crime stories quite well.
He handles action wonderfully.
Yeah.
I think that he's a technically very good director in that regard.
He sometimes needs an editor. You need someone to say, you know what, just trim this down somewhat.
On that, we agree.
Yes.
And I knew that going into watching Manhunter again, that this is a guy who likes to take his time, who loves the montage, who loves to let his films... he likes to let his films breathe. And you have to kind of sort of prepare yourself for that when you go in.
Yeah.
But what really shocked me is that how unkind I think time has ended up being on Manhunter.
Manhunter kind of reminds me of a famous quote. I think the great filmmaker John Boorman, God rest his soul, I think he's passed on, or has he not?
Has he?
I don't know. Anyways, the great John Boorman once said the difference between I'd say even a good movie to a classic movie is that they're timeless. Nothing sort of bogs them down from the era in which they were made. This movie could have been made in any other time, and Manhunter is very much a film of the 80s in a lot of ways. It reeks of sort of 80s cheese that could kind of hurt.
For the record, John Boorman has made some great movies.
Yes.
But he also made The Exorcist too.
He did, and Zardoz.
And that alone should make him fall short of greatness. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that.
Yeah.
Manhunter.
Wow. Manhunter.
The soundtrack is a large part of it,
yes.
I think. Like, the music that he chooses is very of the day. This is, 1987, I think? Or something like
yes,
this.
I do believe so.
And so it would be very current and recognizable and right for the day that it was in.
Yeah.
But 30 years later, I don't want to listen to 3.5 minutes of this 6.5 minute shitty 80s pop song in the middle of this otherwise quite compelling procedural.
It does date the picture, and also some of the lighting as well. One thing, you have to give it props to is the fact that this is the first Thomas Harris novel that's put to film. It has this. It's the first time you see Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
We're introduced to him, and actually, it's a pretty good performance by Brian Cox.
Brian Cox, friend of the show.
Yeah.
Well, at least we really like it.
It's a very reserved performance.
I think he's a rock solid performance here. I think that. I don't think it exceeds anything necessarily that Anthony Hopkins did with Lecter, but I think that it's rock solid. It does exactly what you want.
What's interesting about Hopkins' interpretation is that in a lot of ways it is kind of really over the top, and so it does beg the question, which is the more sound performance of Hannibal Lecter? Hopkins, who is very delicious in some of his scenes, or Brian Cox, who does emote a genuine fear of dread with the character, and is conniving and is really more dangerous locked up than he is alive in a lot of ways.
There's a school of thought is where you can smack your lips and cackle and come off as super crazy.
Yeah.
But the idea is this is very reserved, very sort of polite, sort of distinguished.
He's very
evil,
seductive.
Educated.
He's
evil.
very seductive.
Yeah.
He lures you in just by simply talking to you. So
you don't believe anybody this intelligent could be capable of any amount of evil.
Yeah.
And
he clearly is.
In fact, it's his motivating force.
What hurts it in a lot of ways, though, are unfortunately some of the actors, and that's the one of the things I forgot about Manhunter. You and I are probably going to disagree on this. It's not that Tom Noonan is miscast. I think he is cast quite well. I just think he sort of undersells a couple of scenes. One being the one where he does capture Stephen Lang's reporter character. It's a couple of the line reads just come off as poorly used, and it might show a very young Michael Mann. I think before this he had done Thief, The Keep, I think Crime Story was just starting to take off, so it's sort of a young Michael Mann, and it seems like kind of a weird attention to detail. Joan Allen, and I do believe her first movie role is also, it's you can tell it's a young actor, so
I think
that hurts Manhunter. It does.
I think those problems are story-wise. I don't buy or particularly care about the romance.
Yes.
Between this evil psychopath
Yeah.
and this naive, innocent, blind woman.
Yes.
I don't buy it. I don't particularly want it.
And that's part of the problem with a lot of... Sorry.
I don't think that we want to humanize Tom Noonan's character.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's, everybody's a person in here. There are no monsters in the real world.
Yeah.
But I don't... Once we find out that he slits children's throats in front of their parents, I don't... I'm not going to be in a position where I feel any amount of sympathy for him.
Yes.
So having those scenes, where you get the feeling like maybe if he'd met her before he'd started his little Red Dragon project, he would have worked out okay. But because he believes himself freakish and ugly and unlovable, he acts out in these horrible ways.
Yes.
I like Tom Noonan a lot in this movie, and I think that a lot of it is just his sort of... He's this tall, gaunt...
Like I said,
intimidating looking
well
fellow.
cast. I say go back to the scene where he has that. Basically, he's kidnapped that reporter and he's essentially torturing him. And maybe I'm being biased because we've now had another adaptation, Brett Ratner's adaptation, and you have Ralph Fiennes, who, in a lot of ways, makes it's a very different performance in a lot of ways. He does make Dollarhide somewhat sympathetic.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like that. Part of the problem is, and this is a familiar complaint with Michael Mann movies, is I don't think he writes female characters all that well. If we were going to feel any sort of kind of deeper connection with the Dollarhide character, that romance was going to have to work somehow.
But again, that comes right out of the books, too.
I know.
So
I know.
That's a problem with the story in itself.
But
where the movie works is in the procedural aspect.
Yes.
And this is quintessentially true with Michael Mann's movie. I think most obviously demonstrated in Heat.
Yes.
The movie Heat. Whereas all the heist stuff and all the cop stuff
the
is
attention
great.
to detail is there.
And all of the relationship stuff is meandering, and you kind of wonder why it's there. It doesn't help the movie, right?
I think some of it does in Heat.
I think it's similar. Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll talk about Heat another day.
Yes.
But I think that there's similar problems here in Manhunter.
Yeah. Some of the dialogue is very stilted.
I love the scenes of our main character walking through the crime scene of the house and taking notes on his audio recorder about his interpretation of the events. Yeah. I love the pressure that everyone's under because this guy stalks families. Yeah. And I mean, you're always under pressure because there's always going to be another victim, but the fact that it's going to be an entire family with kids, that's his modus operandi. Yeah. Everybody is working 24 hours and killing themselves to get this guy. Yeah. Love that aspect to it.
Yeah, William Petersen's his character and his arc is actually the selling point of the movie for me, and it's really well done by Petersen. Yeah. Once again, it's kind of stuck in those 80s kind of almost style of acting where having a cigarette dangle from your mouth and having shaved.
All of the rooms are filled with smoke for some reason. Yeah. All of the time.
Yeah. I mean, take away the whole Miami setting, and really, in a lot of ways, it's almost like a Western. I'm surprised Mann hasn't done one yet. So, but yeah, William Petersen I think does save this movie. It's not a terrible movie. The story itself is pretty good. It just has some creaks and moans, and it's sort of stuck in its sort of 80-ness, if you will.
I think this comes from Thomas Harris more than from Michael Mann, but he's got this inclination, whereas typically they keep the monster in the shadows. Yeah. He wants to get the monster out of the shadows and let us get to know the monster as much as possible and get every crevice of it. Yeah. And I understand that as a conceit. Yeah. But for me personally, the monster works better in the shadows. I think that maybe we could agree that less Tom Noonan would have helped this movie. Yeah. Because the more we see Tom Noonan, the more quirky and less creepy he is, right? Yeah. Whereas if they would have made the choice to change the book, since they do it so often in Hollywood anyway.
And they do, actually. The ending of this movie is
quite different. Yeah.
Is quite different from the actual book itself.
In this case, my argument is they should have left the monster more in the shadows.
Yeah.
Their strength was in the procedural aspect.
Yeah.
And like I say, the other things you kind of have to take on the chin. The fact that all the rooms were filled with blue smoke and that the 80s soundtrack was loud and proud.
Yeah.
And that there were long scenes of, people driving from point A to point B and sunsets that just trim the fat, people.
It's man trying to establish his mood in a lot of ways. Maybe trim it a little bit, but
I also watched the director's cut.
Yeah.
There's a movie that came out recently, Drive. Actually, I watched it with you, which is very much emulating Michael Mann.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find interesting is that when people emulate Michael Mann, they choose to emulate this sort of languid pacing and montage and sort of feel the person, feel the character. No dialogue, but less character. Whereas if I'm going to emulate Michael Mann, that is not what I would be choosing for. I would look at his heist sequences or his action sequences or his gunplay, which feels very real, feels very authentic. The other stuff is movie stuff,
Yeah.
There's nothing more movie than a montage, as my friend Matthew would say.
Well, I do enjoy a lot of the style of his movies. I can tolerate his long, sort of pensive, angry man staring into the vapid darkness that he likes to do a whole lot. He's very obsessed with characters who have a lot, there are obsessive as well.
Yeah.
That's something that seems to attract him, at least, to the characters in a lot of ways.
But I think we kind of agree that Manhunter, although very respected in its time, I think is looking pretty dogged.
It hasn't aged.
Compared to some of the thrillers that we have
well.
seen subsequently,
Yeah.
This kind of feels like an episode of CSI stretched out to 2 hours.
Yeah.
With a really indulgent director.
Yes.
And ouch to Michael Mann for that, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
It's a sick idea, Alex. It's sick.
Go ahead, Ben. Telephone the police.
Tell them there's a suitcase full of money, and you don't want it.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about disposal. Who's going to do it? We all are, David. We're all going to do it. Each of us. You, me, and Juliet.
I don't think I can. But Juliet, you're a doctor. You kill people every day.
Is this necessary?
I can't do it. Do you want to play or not?
Okay, so I may have pled guilty there for having a bias against David Lynch.
Yeah.
I will plead guilty here for having a bias for Danny Boyle.
Yeah,
I will
there's
say
no
that
bias. He's just very, very good.
Danny Boyle makes great movies.
He does.
Gives good movies.
I have yet to see a bad Danny Boyle film.
Not all of them are fantastic, but
yes. You know what? That's not true. I have.
But I mean, they're usually worth a look, and I find even the failures to have something that in them that make me say, I'm glad
as soon as I said
it.
that, all of a sudden my memory drifted towards the beach.
Well, Shallow Grave was his first film, and that's what we're going to talk about today. That stars Kerry Fox, Christopher Eccleston, and Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, and
they play 3 young flatmates who are looking for a new member to their little group. One of the many interesting elements of this movie is how kind of unlikable our protagonists are.
They all really are. They're from the opening scene, we sort of realize that they're kind of
shallow.
Well, yes, and kind of assholes.
Yeah. They seem to relish sort of tormenting people who come to apply for the flat who just aren't cool enough to live with them.
Yeah.
They laugh loudly and to people's faces.
Yeah.
They enjoy, the joke of, belittling someone.
Yes.
And they all mutually enjoy it.
Yes.
And these are our protagonists.
Yeah.
Typically, this is something that would work against me for movies. I don't like it when there's nobody that I can identify with at all.
Yeah.
But this movie has such energy to it, and the stakes of the danger of the adventure that misadventure that they get involved in. You're on their side just because of the evil that they're up against, and because of the story being told. How are they going to untangle themselves from this trap that they put themselves in?
Yes.
which, again, what did you think of Shallow Grave?
It conjures up memories of Edgar Allan Poe with a telltale heart in a lot of ways. That was one of the things that sort of, rang very true. Coming back to this movie, because it's been a long time since I've seen Shallow Grave, I forgot how good all three performances are.
Yeah.
Really, now I say it, Christopher Eccleston, you say it.
I thought it was Eccleston, but I could be wrong.
Christopher Eccleston, we'll debate on that. He's really, really good in this, and it's his arc that I find the most intriguing. What happens to him. In a lot of ways, I see him, kind of as, the closest to a victim out of all of the three characters, where he right off the bat, he does sort of succumb to it, to, accepting the money, but he knows right off the bat that it's a bad idea to keep the money, and just his arc.
Yeah.
And what he has to do to sort of, keep the money, I thought was really, really good.
Basically, the story is that they do indeed find a flatmate that's cool enough to live with him, but he promptly dies of a drug overdose.
Yes.
They find him in his room, and they find that he has a case full of money.
Yeah.
And rather than report the death to the police,
they
or
eventually decide to
turn in the money, they decide that they will dispose of the body themselves and attempt to keep the money.
Yeah.
And of course, nothing goes smoothly at all.
Yeah.
The turning point as far as the group of three friends, I think being irreparably severed, is when they draw straws to see who will have to actually do the dismemberment of the corpse.
Yeah.
And Christopher Eccleston ends up having to do it after a protracted scene.
Yeah.
He being the one to get his hands dirty, on top of being the one who was the least interested in doing it, that, I think, breaks him.
Yeah, of course it does.
And his deterioration at once makes him a stronger, more confident person, but also a much more dangerous, self-destructive person.
Yes.
I think that the Carrie Fox and Ewan McGregor characters change less. I think with Carrie Fox...
Well, I think McGregor's... his arc, I don't think he changed a whole bunch, to be perfectly honest.
Carrie Fox, I think, starts to show her spots a little bit more.
Yeah,
I think that some of her falseness sort of comes to light a little bit through it.
Yeah.
But they're all essentially who we were introduced to.
Yeah.
Very selfish, self-interested, kind of jerky people.
Yeah.
But they get in this situation that's way over their heads.
Yeah.
And these guys who are hunting them, these hitmen, are seriously bad news.
Yes, well, the one thing I love, there's lots of things I love about this movie, but also, if you look at, Ewan McGregor's character, what's his name?
I can't remember the name of the character in the movie. IMDb will help us.
Yeah. Anyways, his character is clearly a sociopath in a lot of ways. If you look at, he's clearly leading the charge in a lot of sort of the bad behavior. Has no remorse whatsoever. If you look at that character as a sociopath who sort of falls into a rather tricky situation, I find that movie lots of fun to watch.
My thing with Ewan McGregor, he works at a gossip magazine.
Yes,
I think his character has just sort of embraced the bullshit. He's one of these super cynical people who's like, the world is shit, so why fight it?
Yeah,
and that's not something that you can look up to.
Yeah,
but Carrie Fox will basically turn on the charm if it will help her get her what she needs. She's much more of a master manipulator.
Yeah.
I would actually say she's more closer to being a genuine sociopath than Ewan McGregor as far as how she will change from scene to scene.
The Carrie Fox character clearly has remorse for a lot of things. She's still clearly, I think, a villain.
Yeah, I think we disagree on her. Yeah. I don't think she has any remorse in her at all. But that's me. We'll talk about the climax of the movie. One of the other things that I just wanted to
I think when David, the Christopher's character, Eccleston's character, when he starts to go truly mad, I think it's genuine, sympathy she does feel. There's a couple points where she clearly does show remorse. Yeah. Even scolding the Ewan McGregor's character. But
the way I interpreted it is that
she's very Lady Macbeth. I'll say that.
She was aligning herself with who she figured was going to win this.
Yeah.
Ewan McGregor is all talk, as I was saying. There's a falseness to him.
Yeah.
They have to talk Eccleston into doing it, but when it came down to it, Eccleston will get his hands dirty.
Yeah.
And Eccleston is capable of great violence.
Yes.
And if it came down to a fight between Eccleston and McGregor, Eccleston was probably going to come out on top.
Yeah.
Eccleston was holding all of the cards, and so all of a sudden she was sleeping with him.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, no, I agree. She's very manipulative, and she, makes obviously some bad moral choices.
Yeah. And they're all bad. Again, I'm not necessarily saying her especially, but I don't think I agree that you say that she feels remorse, or more so than anyone else in the movie does.
Okay, well, I'll just disagree.
Fair enough.
But here's one question. The lighting, once again, in this movie is very, very important. There's a lot of, bright reds, but McGregor's room is shot in blue, very different from the other characters, and I kind of wondered if you knew why.
I don't know exactly. I at the time, I sort of interpreted it like he's a photographer / journalist that maybe had a dark room going on in there.
Yeah.
But I think it was probably just a stylistic choice.
Yeah.
He's living in some shadows. I don't know.
Yeah. Once again, there's also themes of voyeurism. That's that's one thing that's almost prevalent throughout this movie.
Yeah. Eccleston ends up locking himself in the attic of the building, drilling holes in all the ceilings and basically spying on everything and everyone.
Yeah.
And that's part of his deterioration.
Yeah.
Eccleston is kind of made a monster, whereas I think that maybe Kerry Fox and Ewan McGregor were already monsters.
It was basically, two wolves living with a sheep in a lot of ways, and they managed, instead of eating the sheep, they managed to create it into...
They turned it into a greater monster than either of them were themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we should talk about the end of the movie. So we're going to go deep into spoiler territory.
Yeah, we haven't spoiled a lot of movies yet. Yeah.
But one of my things as far as why I don't think that Kerry Fox's character has any remorse in her.
Yeah.
There is an elaborate fight sequence where the three of them, Eccleston and Kerry Fox, are going to leave with the money and abandon Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
And he could have let them leave, but Eccleston gets a little bit rough with Kerry Fox, and McGregor loses a temper. A fight ensues. Eccleston ends up dead, and Ewan McGregor ends up with a knife in his shoulder.
Oh, yes.
Kerry Fox then takes off her shoe, drives the knife through his shoulder, pins him to the floor, smiles at him, and then picks up the money and leaves.
Yes.
Or what she thinks is the money.
Yeah. No,
that's where I see there's no remorse. Is she sorry that Eccleston is dead? No. Is she sorry that she pinned Ewan McGregor to the ground? No. Is she sorry that she's going to walk away with all the money when she can split it? No. Not only is she not sorry, she smiles at him.
I agree. She's very, very evil, and we are probably seeing some of her true nature.
Yeah.
The only problem is, before all the shit starts happening, there's a general care between the Ewan McGregor scene. There's a flirtation, actually, and general motherling qualities that she has towards Christopher's characters.
Yeah. Again, I put that towards manipulation. She knew both the guys liked her, and she could manipulate them by exploiting that. She wanted the money, and she was going to do anything it took to get it. And that was the same game all of them were playing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make her better or worse than any of them, but I do not buy the angle that she feels any amount of guilt about it.
Really?
In fact, I think the only time we genuinely see her feeling bad is in the airport scene when she opens the case and realizes that none of the money is there. She can't go back. She's burnt all of her bridges.
Yeah.
And now she's got nothing, and she has to start over with a new life.
Yeah.
And she howls and cries over that because she has lost the game.
She's gotten her just desserts, if you will.
But are we happy that Ewan McGregor wins?
No, not really, because he's, as I said, his character is a sociopath. You might give him a round of applause for being the most sinister. And, whatnot, but I mean, it is a collection of three people that you really do not like.
The way I interpret the end of the film, obviously Eccleston is no more. The cops know what happened, but according to all the evidence, Kerry Fox left him for dead and split with the money. I don't know what superficial legal charges he would have, but my guess is that he would get away with the cash.
We're meant to believe that. I mean, I'm sure if reality sort of kicked in and the police investigated all of this. I don't think he's hiding the money.
Yeah, she disappears. She's just gone.
He's hiding the money.
Yeah. So basically, he gets slapped on the wrists and goes home and keeps the money, is the way I interpret it.
Yeah, that's true.
It's an interesting movie, and it's got a real momentum to it. It's got a real energy to it, which a lot of Danny Boyle's movies have.
Yeah.
You can tell right away that you're in the hands of a really gifted director.
Yeah, no, it
and
has that
the
great
cast
opening.
is equally
and
strong
that great opening monologue by Christopher Eccleston's character, excuse me.
Yeah. It's a very quick, 96-minute, fairly exciting watch.
Yeah. Once again, the lighting is so good in this movie. I love the set of the loft as well. It's really, really good. I mean, that's the fact that the majority of this movie takes place in that loft.
Elements of this movie you've seen before, but I think, bringing this cast to the fold, it's kind of too bad that Carrie Fox hasn't really erupted.
Yeah, she disappeared kind of after this, because at the time, I sort of thought, oh, here's this big movie that just came out of nowhere, and it sort of introduced the world to
Eccleston and Ewan McGregor have gone on to much,
Yeah, but I heard one. I saw on the poster for some art film a couple of years ago, but
she's in that Canadian independent movie, The Hanging Garden.
Yeah,
but she doesn't seem to have hit the heights that the others had, and I think she was really good in the movie.
She was really good in this movie.
Anyway, overall, big thumbs up for Charlotte Grave. Anything else you want to say about Charlotte?
No, that's about it.
I have this condition.
A condition?
It's my memory.
Amnesia.
No. It's different from that. Since my injury, I can't make new memories. Everything fades. If we talk for too long, I'll forget how we started. And next time I see you, I'm not going to remember this conversation.
What's the last thing that you do remember?
My wife.
That's sweet.
Dying.
Lenny!
I guess I've already told you about my condition.
Oh, well, only every time I see you.
You don't remember where you've been or what you've just done?
No, I can't make new memories. It's like waking. It's like you just woke up.
When you find this guy, what are you gonna do?
I'm gonna kill him.
Maybe I can help you find him. Are you sure you want this?
My wife deserves vengeance.
Do not trust her. She's going to use you.
Memento.
Memento.
I have a confession to make.
Bring it.
About Christopher Nolan, though.
Okay.
Christopher Nolan makes good movies.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't really made a terrible movie, or even I'd say mediocre movie. The one thing about Christopher Nolan I can't quite explain, the rewatchability of these films are sometimes very taxing, and I don't know why. I've tried watching Inception 3 times since I first saw it and thought, wow, this is a really good movie. And I've turned it off because I've either fallen asleep or something else. I have yet to see The Prestige again. I don't think I'm going to watch the third Batman film because it's an alright movie.
Christopher Nolan is the Hollywood's #1 boy right now.
Yeah,
everybody loves Nolan, and Memento was his first big movie. He did a little indie called Following, I think.
And it's not bad. I mean, it's his first movie.
But this is his first big.
Yes, this is the one that essentially made him.
I have a thing, again, I seem to have a thing with all of these directors. I'm snobby. But I think Christopher Nolan is a really good director.
Yes.
I don't think he's amazing.
Really?
And a lot of people think he is amazing. I think that he really... He's got this thing where his movies look and feel so right. And again, he has a real good feel for action and complex set sequences.
Yeah.
But there's a predisposition to all of his movies that he wants people to also see how smart this movie is.
Yeah.
This is not just technically well made. There's a lot of brains behind this movie. Mm-hmm. Even my Batman movies are going to be smarter than any other Batman movies that have ever been made.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all well and good.
Mm-hmm.
But I find with all of these movies, almost all of them, because they present themselves in this sort of hoity-toity, we're super smart blockbuster fashion, will have one or two plot elements that loudly kind of speak against it and go, well, but that's a loophole. That doesn't really make 100% sense. Mm-hmm. All the layers in time in Inception, I don't think fall together perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the twist in Prestige can be untwisted. I think that the super Machiavellian plan of the Joker in The Dark Knight works against the whole theme of chaos that they were working into the movie.
Yeah.
But he kind of trips over his own feet in that respect of saying, look how smart I am.
Yeah.
I don't think it's present in Memento as much.
No, I mean, Memento in a lot of ways, it's they trim the fat on it. It works well. It's what I would call a gimmick film.
Yes.
And I that's the one thing I missed. The time period that Memento came out, a lot of interesting filmmakers were trying new things, and that just doesn't happen anymore.
I will say, without the structure of the movie being as it is, if they just told the story in a linear fashion, ho-hum.
Yes.
Or, I mean, maybe not ho-hum, maybe mildly interesting, but certainly not. But it is the presentation.
Yes.
And the presentation is, since we're going to talk about the plot of this movie.
Yes, we're spoiling things early.
Our main character, played by Guy Pearce, has a condition where he basically has no long-term memory. Probably no short-term memory. He forgets everything. Every few minutes is just sort of reset.
Yeah.
So as such, he has to keep notes all the time. He tattoos things on his body.
Yeah.
And to further complicate things, when we meet him, he's on a mission to avenge the death of his wife.
Yes.
He's trying to hunt down the person responsible for breaking him and destroying his life.
Yeah.
And it's made very difficult because of this disability. And he doesn't know, nor do we, if he can trust the people around him.
Yeah.
But we do know from the very first frame of this movie that he does kill somebody.
Yeah.
Who that person is and whether or not they're a guilty party, we don't find out until the end.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's pretty obvious who that person is. That's not the big secret.
Right.
Yeah.
But the movie, works backwards.
Yes.
Is basically. There's sequences that are in black and white, sequences that are in color.
Yeah.
And once you sort of figure out the pattern of the movie, you kind of... It's an interesting approach, because this is not how Shelby would be interpreting things.
Yes.
It's not that tracked on it. I don't know how you could approach that.
Yeah.
Whereas the information is given and then somehow we are forced to forget it.
Yeah.
you couldn't. But so instead we have the story told backwards.
Yeah. One thing that sometimes it either really works for Christopher Nolan or it can fall flat on its face is Nolan loves to do the whole messing with the chronological order of time and also, the idea of memory and how we perceive it. That's a consistent theme in all of his films.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works. It works in Memento. It works, I think, in the first Batman movie. I think it even kind of works in The Dark Knight and The Prestige. That all works where you're telling that story with all the characters' emotions and whatnot. But when you play it in chronological order, it can sometimes sort of upset the balance, like it did in, say, his Man of Steel, where I didn't really feel anything for the characters in a lot of ways, just because the order, it is not linear.
Right.
It can take you out of the picture, but it somehow works in Memento.
And Zack Snyder directed Man of Steel, didn't he?
Yes, but Nolan wrote it.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yes, he did.
I haven't seen Man of Steel. No comment.
Yeah.
One thing that I really did love, we are given a backstory exposition of a case file of this Shelby Leonard.
Yes.
And it's seen in these little black and white vignettes with Stephen Tobolowsky, who is...
Well, Leonard is Guy Pearce.
Yeah, but we're seeing another character who supposedly has the same illness.
Yes, I know. Yes.
And basically this is a case file of, or is being presented as a case file as somebody who has a similar affliction.
Yeah.
It's a largely wordless performance from Tobolowsky, but I really like it.
Yeah.
And it basically highlights the most interesting aspects of the film.
Yeah.
The other thriller elements are good and well enough handled. There's an exciting chase sequence, and there's people you don't know who to trust or not.
Yeah.
Carrie-Anne Moss and Joe Pantoliano both at times take advantage of this
All
character.
the characters are guilty of that. They're all very manipulative, but that's classic film noir.
Yeah. Carrie-Anne Moss basically uses him to chase a bad dude out of town.
Yeah.
And Joe Pantoliano, who knows how long and how many times he's been using Leonard.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to really like those characters.
Yeah.
I think Carrie-Anne Moss's character feels a little bit guilty about it.
Yeah.
But she also knows that he won't feel bad about it because he'll forget.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that absolves her, but she knows that she's not.
She's
causing...
I find her more sad than anything else.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Where I think, and again, we got to, for me, in order to understand, I don't know if this works against the movie, but it's one of the things that I think of when I think of Memento. We go to the end where we find out that Yeah, he's killed the Joe Pantoliano character, this cop who's been abusing him for basically to clean house for whatever he wants.
Yeah.
But we see Guy Pearce's character consciously realize that he's been duped.
Yeah.
And know for a fact that this quest that he's on it has been resolved.
Yeah.
And that basically he's trying to not only avenge his own death, but sort of redeem himself for his responsibility.
Yes.
In his wife's death.
Yeah.
Because as we learned that his wife didn't believe that he had this illness. She didn't die in the initial attack, as we were originally told.
Yeah.
She lived with him, and she couldn't understand that he wouldn't remember anything, and it started actually driving her crazy.
Yeah.
So much so that she basically, I don't know if she commits suicide by raising the dose on her
she did.
diabetic medication, thinking that he would know not to give her that much dosage. Clearly he would know that, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And so she went into a coma and ended up dying. He was responsible.
Yeah.
And all he has in these little 15 or 20 minute bursts of memory is a quest to redeem himself for this. That's the only thing that he can hang on to.
Yeah.
So he consciously chooses to continue that quest.
You've got to, I think if you take the fact that Leonard is an antagonist and not a protagonist in a lot of ways. I mean, I sort of see him as a bit of a villain. I mean, there's a tragic flaw to him that this was done to him.
But he does, in the end, make the choice.
He does.
He knows for a fact, he'll forget it in a few minutes, but he knows that fact too.
Yeah.
But he knows for the fact that he's going to end up killing another innocent person.
Yeah.
But he needs the quest.
Yeah.
So he makes the choice to do it.
Yeah.
So in the end, this is sort of the origin story of some kind of villain, a super villain, mass murderer.
Yeah.
And he would never horrifyingly be convicted because he is so damaged that no court in the world would convict him.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's kind of a bitter little number when you sort of put all the pieces down.
Good does not triumph over evil in a lot of ways in this film.
But it is an interestingly told story.
No, yeah.
It is a well-acted story.
Yes, it is.
And actually, I would put it pretty high in the catalog of Christopher Nolan films.
Yeah.
That said, I would probably stop short of calling it amazing.
Well, yeah. I'd say that's another thing is you don't... Well, a lot of criticism of Christopher Nolan with his films is, you don't sympathize with his characters a whole lot. Even in sort of something like Inception or Insomnia, it's hard to make emotional connections to him, and I don't quite know why. They're beautiful looking movies. I think these, the attention to detail once again is very good. But a lot of characters, you strain to understand their emotional journey, and you need to identify with those characters at some point.
Yeah. Well, you don't necessarily have to identify with everybody in the movie, but it's nice to have somebody to hang your hat on.
Yeah.
And yeah. At the end of the day, we were watching the story about bad people doing bad things, and that's the end. But you know what? If we're honest, a lot of the movies we watch are that. A lot of the comedies, interestingly, that people will watch or that I really like are about rich people
doing bad things,
being petty and shitty, and mourning how blasé and unfulfilling their lives are, know, and really taken in the scope of the horrible shit that goes on every day. It's hilarious that we derive entertainment from it.
Nolan loves to play with the sequence of time in his movies, and that's something that works very well with this movie. What else? I missed the time that this movie came out. Like I said, this film reminded me of a time when directors took chances with their films. It reminds me of that Mike Figgis film, was it Time Code? Time Code, do you remember that one?
Yeah, with all the split screen.
Yeah, where filmmakers were actually playing with the medium of film, and was challenging. Yeah, no, and it has all the characteristics of a film noir, that femme fatale with Carrie-Anne Moss, the lighting of it. But there's something that doesn't elevate it to a great film, and I can't quite put my finger on it.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people would argue that point. I know that some people think Memento is like the most amazing film ever made. Yeah. And it's a really good movie. And actually, like I said, I would rank it high in Nolan's list of films. But it's not one that I would revisit again and again and again, I don't think necessarily.
Give
give you a briefing about the institution?
All I know is it's a mental hospital.
For the criminally insane.
Gentlemen, welcome to Shutter Island. You're hereby required to surrender your firearms.
We are duly appointed federal marshals.
But during your stay, you will obey protocol. Is that understood? We take only the most dangerous, damaged patients, ones no other hospital can manage.
These are all violent offenders, right? They've hurt people, murdered them in some cases.
In almost all cases, yes. We try to provide them with a measure of calm.
Personally, Doctor, I'd have to say screw their sense of calm. So this prisoner escapes in the last 24 hours.
We don't know how she got out of her room.
So another fantabulous director here, Martin Scorsese.
One of the best.
He has been tethered himself a lot with DiCaprio the last 10 years or so of his career. Not every movie has DiCaprio, but most of them do. We've had like The Aviator, Gangs of New York, The Departed, Shutter Island, and now The Wolf of Wall Street.
Yes.
Am I missing one?
No, you got them all.
I was kind of unsure about The Marriage for the first while.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised Scorsese did a horror film. I guess we did have Cape Fear. That's more of a thriller than it is horror. But
as far as The Marriage of DiCaprio and Scorsese, a little rocky for me at first. It wasn't until The Departed where I really felt like, that 100% worked for me.
Yeah.
DiCaprio was good in the role, and it was the right script for Scorsese, and yay. And, here we come to Shutter Island.
Yeah.
And again, he's... we're at the beginning of the movie, we see him portraying an investigator as far as the story is going, and he and his new partner show up to this island asylum to investigate
a disappearance. Who is patient 67, essentially.
Mm-hmm. So on its face, we're looking at another sort of procedural, but set in this spooky sort of gothic asylum.
Yeah.
And it's a period piece. Is it set in the 30s or 40s?
I do believe it's definitely after World War II, so it's I think the start of the 50s, maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, it's star-studded because Scorsese draws
it's
in
an
the
amazing
talent.
cast, and you sit down and think about it.
Mark Ruffalo,
Patricia Clarkson, I think.
Haley, or what's his name? The guy from Watchmen. Max von Sydow.
Yeah, Max von Sydow.
Emily Mortimer.
Ted Levine is also very good in a very limited role as well.
Michelle Williams. Yes.
Yeah, Michelle Williams is very good. But Scorsese usually has amazing cast. That's just one of those things.
If Scorsese calls, you pick up the phone.
Yeah, you say, yes, sir, I will be here at this time.
Chances are it was going to be worth your time.
Yeah. It's also one of the better DiCaprio performances out of all the Scorsese films.
Absolutely, because it's a tricky performance to get.
It is, yeah.
And again, we give spoilers for this, but before we get deep into this review, I'm going to encourage anybody listening
if
who
you
has not
haven't
seen
Shutter Island,
please watch it before you listen to this
Yes,
review.
because now we are getting to the meat of the movie, and that has to spoil some pretty big things.
There's no way to really talk about this movie without getting into it.
So, you've been warned. If you haven't seen the movie, turn off the podcast now.
We always have spoilers, but I do not, again, special mention.
I think this and Fight Club will have to have some major spoilers off the bat, because we have to talk about it.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Basically, what we are being treated to, what we are seeing, is a fairly bold experimental procedure, psychological procedure.
I would argue a play. The one thing, it's kind of interesting. The first time I was watching Shutter Island, the first thing that popped in my head is, I wonder if Marat Sade by Peter Weiss was an inspiration, because if you stop and think about it, you've got a bunch of inmate staff, the assignment inmate staff, along with a lot of the inmates, putting on a grand play.
A grand show for
the DiCaprio character.
He's actually an inmate of the asylum. They basically put him on a boat, drove him in a circle, and drove him back to the island, and they all let him play this role, because he's convinced that he's not who he really is.
Yes.
That he's actually an investigator, and that he's trying to get to the bottom of this case.
Yeah.
So I think as a last-ditch effort from the Ben Kingsley character, who I believe his intentions are good. I mean,
I think he's he's probably the most I wouldn't say the most tragic of the characters, but
we're at a point with
he is definitely a good one.
We're at a point with this patient, I guess, that as far as they're concerned, that the only thing they can do is lobotomize him.
Yeah.
And as a last-ditch effort to try and shake him out of his psychosis,
which he does,
they
do
this elaborate play for him.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't know this. As far as we're concerned, DiCaprio really is, who he says he is.
Yeah.
But everybody around him is acting so suspiciously.
Yeah.
So is he being driven mad? Is how we interpret it, or is there some huge thing going on behind the scenes?
Yeah.
So the bait and switch in the movie works really well.
Yeah.
And I think that the central performance by DiCaprio as a person who is, living out a fantasy in their head and slowly coming to realize it, but fighting against that knowledge.
Yeah.
So you can sort of see him reinvest in the investigating when he gets something that really shakes him.
Yeah.
He has to kind of reorient, but he does it again and again and again.
Yeah.
And sort of when you watch the movie the second time, the story is about, can he wake himself out of the psychosis?
Yeah.
Can he get over it? Is he able to give over? And much like we discussed with Memento, we find that he really needs to live this fantasy in order to live at all.
Yeah.
And that at the end, as horrible as it sounds, death or lobotomy might actually be a relief for this character.
Yeah.
So this is dark stuff.
I love the tragic ending. I love the fact that the experiment actually did work and he's been knocked out of his psychosis.
Yeah.
I'm not really good. We agree that he is very well knowingly going to the lighthouse to get the lobotomized because he doesn't want to live with the guilt anymore.
I can't remember that line.
I have it right here. I'd rather not living as a monster or dying as a good man.
Yeah.
Is that line?
Yeah.
I'd rather die
as a good man,
and not live as a monster.
Yeah.
And he says that to the Mark Ruffalo character, his doctor essentially.
Yeah. Who he thought was his partner, but was his doctor.
And at that point, you sort of realize the horror that Ruffalo now he realizes that it did work, and he lets the patient off go to essentially be brain dead.
Yeah.
I found that wonderfully tragic and beautiful in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And a horrifying true element in it. That was a way that the mentally ill were treated.
Yeah.
And in some places, I guess, still are.
Yeah. What is the name of the head prison guard? It's Lynch. What's his name?
Right, the guy from Zodiac.
Yes.
John Carroll Lynch.
Yes. Well, you have to give special nod to him. He's
very
good.
Really disgusted by this whole puppet show that's going on.
Yeah.
Not because he feels any sympathy, I don't think, for the DiCaprio character.
No.
Just that he's acted, asked to kowtow to this psycho. Right?
Yeah, and I think he's more. I mean, it's partial sort of fear because he's just, recently what's triggered all this whole thing was the fact that he brutally assaulted, another inmate.
Yeah.
And now he has to, play along with this game in a lot of ways. There's that.
I think what makes this movie a horror movie for me.
Well, it's the mood and atmosphere.
Well, mood and atmosphere, absolutely. But it is kind of a procedural sort of Twilight Zone bait and switch.
Yeah.
But for me, and this is a personal thing, when we see his true backstory.
Yeah.
He's had these visions of him failing to save children in the war, and we've had visions of these weird sort of living doll-like creatures. And we find out, the truth of it is that his sort of wife, who was left at home with the kids and grown despondent and ill herself, he came home one day to find that she had drowned all of the children. And there's a sequence with DiCaprio pulling these bodies out of the water and screaming and howling that almost makes this movie a one-timer for me. I mean, it isn't, because I wanted to watch it again to see that all of the shell game that Scorsese was playing
really
worked.
well done, though.
But that sequence is utterly gut-wrenching, and DiCaprio is amazing in it.
Yeah.
Like, I finally sort of get what Scorsese was saying. I mean, I don't hate DiCaprio, but I certainly didn't think he was one of our, most treasured assets as an entertainer.
Really?
And Scorsese obviously does. And the more he works with Scorsese, I think the more he starts to earn the reputation he has.
Really? See, I think he'd already done a lot of good work up until the point he even started working with Scorsese.
Yeah.
You have to mention, he'd already been nominated for Gilbert Grape at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's really good at the Basketball Diaries. Say what you will about Titanic.
It was popular.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's really good in the Man with Two Masks, which is light fluff. I mean,
The Man in the Iron Mask?
The Man in the Iron Mask.
Oh, that's a dreadful movie.
It's a bad movie, but I think he's good in it.
Anyway, yeah, he's sort of this baby face.
Blood Diamond before this?
This was, I think it was before this, but
yeah, Blood Diamond. See, he's really good in Blood Diamond. So I think he'd earned enough acting chops. I agree. Working with Scorsese has helped him.
I think he's a solid actor. He's good, but it wasn't until The Departed that he was really knocking me over. I thought he was great in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. He had a great young performance there, but mainly I thought he was a capable, solid actor who all of the girls were screaming over, and that made him very popular.
Yeah.
I didn't believe him as a heavyweight actor, basically, until, The Departed, and especially this one, Shutter Island.
Yeah.
And that's just me. I've always sort of saw him as that baby-faced teen idol guy.
I think he's outgrown
he kind of finally outgrew it.
Yeah.
But it took a while. For me, anyway.
Really?
But we're not talking about DiCaprio. We're talking about Shutter Island. And I am noticing a lot of things on the plus column here and not too many things on the minus. The sort of dour overall atmosphere and the sort of harsh, ugly themes of the story being told maybe won't make this one that will get revisited again and again and again. It's
I enjoyed seeing it again.
Yeah. But it is a very well-made movie by a very, you can tell you're in the hands of a very capable filmmaker.
I read this interview with both DiCaprio and Scorsese once. I think it just was Scorsese. And he admitted that in the past 10, 15 years he'd been sort of forced to make, a couple of films that he couldn't get out of the deal.
Right.
And I often wonder if Shutter Island was one of those films that he's talking about.
Really?
I don't know. He admitted that, in the past, especially in the past 15 years, he had sort of gotten himself involved in deals and then wanted to get out and couldn't have.
Right. The project changed, but he was already committed. Or
something like that. I mean, it's one of the reasons why that other film that he's just now doing about those Jesuit priests in Japan, what was that one called, Passion or something? Hasn't gotten made yet. But I often sort of went with Shutter Island. It's really, really good. I mean, even as a classic horror film, there's a lot of things to love. I love the fact that you see the after effects of the violence, but you never really see a lot of it.
Right.
I think that's a great technical little skill that he had with Shutter Island as well. I love the fact that some of the characters, they aren't really characters, they're caricatures, almost like the play Everyman, where it's also a statement on violence and how it does truly affect people. That's that Ted Levine monologue. I forgot how good Ted Levine could possibly be, given with the right people. And here's a shining example. His monologue there, what was it? Basically, that monologue on war and violence is done extremely well. Just the gothic setting. I don't know. There's lots of things I just connected with this film. I think it's probably one of the better DiCaprio performances of his career. It's just that kind of journey.
I mean, everybody has a shell game to play, but especially DiCaprio, because some of the staff are better at the ruse than others, and some of them like what's going on more than others.
Yeah.
You can sort of see that in their performances the second time around.
Yeah.
And the other inmates being sort of confused and put off by all of a sudden seeing everybody kowtow to him.
That God Loves Violence monologue by Ted Levine, I just remember the name of it, is really well done. I sort of almost encourage you to watch that scene again.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a worthy watch, and it's going to rank high on the list for me.
Yep.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Why? How much can you know about yourself? You've never been in a fight.
Wait, let me start earlier. Like many of you, I was stuck.
No, you can't die from insomnia.
I'd flip through catalogs and wonder, what kind of dining set defines me as a person? This is your life, and it's ending 1 minute at a time. I prayed for a different life.
Soap. I make and I sell soap.
And this is how I met Tyler Durden.
Come on, hit me before I lose my nerve.
Oh. Ow! It hit me in the ear!
It was on the tip of everyone's tongue.
Can I be next?
We just gave it a name.
Gentlemen, welcome to Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
After Fight Club, we all started seeing things differently.
You're gonna have to keep me up all night.
And she ruined everything.
You're not into her, are you?
No, God, not at all.
We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be movie gods and rock stars, but we won't.
He had a plan.
So now on to Fight Club.
Yep.
And this movie made a lot of noise when it first came out.
Yeah. I think it's still making noise.
It's dirty and it's depraved and it encourages terrible values and it's all those things. But it's also kinetic. It's amazingly well made.
Yep.
The acting in it is pretty incredible.
Can you think of any other film quite like it?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's plenty of movies where there's a reveal about one of the central characters that drops in the third act, but I have not seen any movie told with this sort of level of adrenaline, panache, and brains.
This movie almost kind of downloads and instead of just, you're viewing it. It is a very aggressive movie.
And that's the theme, the male aggressive sort of hormonal angry monkey id that is inside of all men, that has been suppressed and suppressed and suppressed for so long, allowed off the tether. That's what the movie sort of explores, and that's what the movie kind of tries to be.
It explores a lot of things. There's lots of balls thrown in the air with this movie. I think one thing that people are almost afraid to examine, that it wants to ask that question, it makes the strong suggestion, I should say, that violence between men, especially young men, can be a healthy form of communication. And I think that idea turns a lot of people, especially a lot of women, off. Because violence it's such a tricky thing, especially in real life. It's quite a horrifying thing. And just the idea that it is, something that creates a lot of positive... It's a healthy form of communication between men, and I think it is in a lot of ways. I sort of think back to... the times when I wrestled with my brother, and it got intense, but it was, we were, communicating in a lot of ways. It was something that, we did every time that we saw each other for a while.
Is there something inherently violent about men? Maybe. Or maybe just people in general.
Yeah.
But we've been asked to suppress it, and understandably so, because we can't go around killing everybody we disagree with.
Yes.
Or, bashing the head of a romantic rival or anything like this. Again, it's a complex issue. I don't know exactly where I land on it. I like to think that men aren't complete monkey Neanderthals at all, but I do think there's an element of truth to this sort of thing. I heard this argument made that one of the reasons that there's such a huge boon in like psychological illnesses like depression or in all of these sort of anxiety illnesses is because we are advancing sociologically and technologically quicker than our bodies are.
Yeah.
So we spend our lives, most of us, sitting in front of a computer in a cubicle or whatever. Yeah. But we're not built to do that. Yeah. We're built to go hunt and gather.
Yes.
And as a result, we get twitchy and we get upset. And there's some part of us that feels angry because we're not doing what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And this sort of tension, and particularly the male aspect of that, is the nerve that is worked in Fight Club.
Fight Club is one of the most homoerotic films made by a major studio.
You think?
Oh, I think I know. Let's look at some of the facts. One, when the movie was finally coming out, and a lot of media was being shown towards the writer of the book, who name once again currently escapes me, Chuck Palahniuk. Yeah. A magazine was going to out him. Right. You sort of forced him to come out of the closet, and so he had to do it. That right off the bat is sort of when they make it go, okay. If you look how the men treat the Marla character, you sort of kind of it's very misogynistic, or can be viewed as very misogynistic. they really don't like a lot of women, and they're a lot of the anger towards them. This is not suggesting that, gay men have anger towards women, but I kind of got the impression that the man was struggling with his sexuality. I mean, yes, they use her for sex, but clearly
I think that Top Gun, it remains the most homoerotic movie ever made. But
sure, but I'm not done.
Okay.
The scene that bells go off, it's the scene where we've been introduced to the Jared Leto character, early in the film. He's quite around. The scene where Norton essentially turns him into lamb chops.
He pulverizes somebody.
It's the line he uses.
Gives the line, I wanted to destroy
something beautiful. Yeah. Why that line? Why that?
Well, again, I don't know if I would hang the whole movie as a parable.
I kind of think it's a man fighting with the fact that he certainly thinks he's gay.
Okay.
And
well, I mean, just because the author is gay, I mean, for me, it doesn't necessarily mean we treat it that. For me, this is about men.
Yeah.
This is about the world of men.
And he surrounds himself with a lot of men.
And Marla is the only girl in it. And basically, to Tyler Durden, she's essentially a fuck toy. And to the Edward Norton character, she's this exasperating person who he finds fascinating because it might be the one person that he's met who's as close to as crazy as he is.
Yeah.
So it's not a particularly positive performance or portrayal of a woman, but all of the men are intensely aggressive and violent and acting out and love Fight Club.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's more about...
It's also how some of the fights are staged as well. I mean, you've got shirtless men that find the violence orgasmic. If there's some scenes where they are literally hugging each other towards the end and crying.
They are bonding over violence.
Yes.
But is it necessarily sexual in nature? Well, that's whatever baggage you're going to bring to it. I honestly think, that the themes of the book and the movie are exploring go towards men. Not necessarily homosexual men, just men. But that's me. Because I think that everybody can relate to this sort of feeling like we've had to bottle our true selves.
Yeah.
Be that the desire to be with another man or the desire to yell when something pisses you off.
Yeah.
Or the desire to smash your fist on the table where that would be, interpreted as an ugly male behavior.
Yeah.
It's an honest expression of emotion. And if we have to respect the honest expression of emotion from women, why must we fear and hate honest expression from men?
I guess there's also that scene where they're talking about marriage where, the Pitt character is saying how he phoned his father and what should he do next. And one of the things is he trashes the institution of marriage. I don't know.
Durden sort of trashes the institution of everything. He hates everything that's
the writer obviously has a big fear of any sort of organized group, and I say bravo to that.
Tyler Durden is the character who has all the sex with Marla too, right? I mean, we've gotten this deep into it, and we haven't really talked about the premise or anything of the movie. But again, I don't imagine anybody
we're going to have to get to spoilers at this point.
I don't imagine anybody listening to this doesn't really know the premise of it.
Yeah.
But the Edward Norton character, who is going through some sort of terrible psychological issues, meets a fellow named Tyler Durden.
Yes.
And he finds his life quickly, it basically falls apart.
Yeah.
And again, the big twist is that he is Tyler Durden.
Yes.
He is meeting his true self. And his true self is the male animus sort of let off the leash.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
That's basically the movie. We don't get that reveal till the end about the Bradley
They are the same characters for those who haven't quite figured it out. They are literally, it's his alternate personality. Yeah. It's interesting how this movie is cast because the narrator, we never do learn the character's his name. I do believe in the book. I've read the book and it does mention it. I think it is like rather pathetic, or not pathetic name. Common name. Jim, I think, is actually the name of the character. It's interesting how they cast it, where obviously you get this sort of sheepish-looking Edward Norton, and then this almost kind of demigodish-looking Brad Pitt character that is, a lot of more women would find sort of him attractive.
Yeah. But again, I guess it walks the line. Girls want to sleep with him, and guys kind of want to be him. He's just generally appealing.
I just find
ultimate macho sort of figure.
This movie connected with a lot of males my age when this movie came out. There was something about it. They kind of went, "Yeah, man, yeah."
But again, I think that both the book and the movie go over the board with the male aggression thing.
Yeah.
And I think the first half of Fight Club is amazing. Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
I think the second half of Fight Club is good.
It does lag a little bit when it gets into the whole cult storyline. I think that's just Palahniuk, once again, sort of talking about his fear of any sort of organized group and how it attacks our individualism. You know, he becomes what he hates and fears the most, where he essentially becomes part of a, he runs.
He is a leader who rules unequivocally. Everybody will do what he says without question.
Yeah.
And almost overnight seems to have a net of people across the country, which I don't buy at all.
Yeah.
And I think that the movie does start to break down if you look too closely at it in some angles. I think that the establishment of the Fight Club, I can buy that the idea that a bunch of guys would think it would be cool to have a little basement room where they met and had, like, basically street fights in a controlled or semi-controlled environment.
Yeah.
And getting off on sort of the whatever violent energy that is. It's not my bag, but I know that there's an audience for it.
Yeah.
But I don't get some guy coming out of a bar seeing an obviously crazy person beating the shit out of himself and then asking, can I be next? Can I learn from you? Because that is what happens if you want to interpret the events. A guy walks out of the bar and sees Tyler Durden and Edward Norton having this fight.
Yeah.
And he wants to be involved.
There is that suspension of
that
disbelief.
Doesn't make sense. And like I say, just the size of this cult and the rapidity in which it forms, I don't buy at all.
Yeah.
I think the turning point of the movie is when the Meatloaf character dies.
Yeah.
And there's this big... His name was Richard Paulson.
Robert Paulson.
Robert Paulson, thank you. His name was Robert Paulson. I think that's where the movie officially goes off the rails. And whereas I could sort of blur my eyes and say, this sort of felt like something that could exist in the real world, we have now entered a full-on sort of satirical almost universe.
This is
and
I
missed the grounded reality of the first half of the movie.
Yeah. This is the problem both with the movie and the novel. It's a common problem. I think, Chuck got obsessed with his whole fear of organized groups because a lot of ways it's very critical of any sort of support self-help group. Any sort of group that can stifle your individualism. And that does hurt the story.
Again, I don't know. I think that the characters are using these self-help programs, Marla and the Edward
They're
Norton
addicted
character,
to them.
They do go there because hearing real people talk about real problems and cry somehow helps them cry. So I don't know. I mean, I think the people who are legitimately at the group are being helped.
Yes.
And these guys who are piggybacking the group, yes, they're exploiting the group, and that makes them horrible.
Yeah.
But they are also getting something out of it too.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I would agree that it's an argument against self-help, but I do agree that the fact that two of our main characters use self-help groups for their own personal, means, again, this is a movie full of unlikable people.
Yeah.
The climax of the movie is very exciting, and they rock some pixies, and some buildings fall, and it looks and feels cool, and it feels like an apocalyptic, climactic ending.
A lot of people would sort of giggle if all the big credit centers of the world would sort of explode because then it would go down to zero, and a lot of their debt would kind of disappear.
But I mean, there's no reality to the ending of this.
I love the anti-capitalist themes as well in this movie. As well. I mean, rah for that.
It's very energetic, it's very rapid, and it seems like a race to the ending. And the ending weirdly does sort of feel right as far as the scale and spectacle of it, and then credits.
Yeah.
But, again, it's really started out being about something, and at the end it is a slick, entertaining movie, and I would never say otherwise. But I think it brings up a lot of cool issues, explores a lot of cool themes, and shows off some good acting and some good filmmaking. It's sort of like it pushes itself out there and says, we are now cinema, we are strong. But I don't think it's like an A+ movie either. I think there are flaws to Fight Club, and I think people should stop pretending that there aren't.
There's some suspension of disbelief with this movie. I like the film that there's no other film quite like it. It was exploring some themes that I think that people found very uncomfortable.
And it is entertaining, and I encourage everybody to watch the movie. Yeah. This is not a negative review of Fight Club, but most people feel about Fight Club the way I imagine you feel about Fight Club, that it's one of the best movies of the 90s, and that it's like Fincher's best work. Yes. And I would disagree with both of those things.
Wow. Wow.
I still think it's a really good movie. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm saying it's just a really good movie.
I guess, one thing that I thought was kind of blew me away was, and you sort of see it, those little cuts of Brad Pitt, and you see him in even that sort of Visa or that MasterCard commercial. He's there. That's, at that point where,
little blips of Durden
Durden
trying to force
the psychosis of Durden is starting to crack into, and once again, that's playing with the narrative that I hadn't quite seen otherwise.
And again, that goes to, like I said, Fincher's spectacle.
Yeah.
At the beginning, when we meet Edward Norton's character and everything is he's got all the IKEA furniture and his mail order soap and everything, and we see his entire place like it's a big retail outlet. Or when he imagines almost daydreaming, almost wanting for a plane crash, we see the plane split apart and there's a huge special effects sequence just for an act of whimsy, a whim in his head. The fact that Fincher can go there so seamlessly and take the viewer with him. He's an amazing filmmaker. I mean, you can see that. And subsequent films would bear this out.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's a great watch. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm giving it a negative review. I'm just saying it ain't perfect. And stop saying it is.
No, I guess no, it's not perfect. Yeah, I can see there are flaws to it, but I can see there are a lot of flaws to some of the films that also came around that time that I would consider outstanding. I love the fact that there's so much going on with this movie. To sort of elevate it to, I would say, a classic of the 90s. And it really also opened the door to a lot of techniques that other filmmakers would then use. The beginning of this movie is outstanding. Even the opening credits with the Dust Brothers score. I love the wicked sense of humor of this movie. I mean, there's a sort
this
of...
This film will be remembered, and rightfully so.
Yeah, so that's why I'm sort of surprised on certain negativities of it. I guess I overlooked them in a lot of ways. They're there, but there's so much good stuff there. And, I mean, it's probably the last ballsiest film that 20th Century Fox ever made. They've sort of, fallen into the let's make a whole lot of series of comic book movies or, really bad remakes.
Remake.
It's the last time that I thought, that 20th Century Fox made a gutsy, ballsy movie that... it ruffled a few feathers, and rightly so. It wasn't just shock in a lot of ways. Like I said, it was exploring themes that, in intelligence that make people sort of somewhat kind of disturbed. And
I appreciate the sort of anarchist vibe to the movie.
Yeah.
Even though the Fight Club is nothing that I could associate with and nothing that I would look up to.
Yeah.
I like that this movie is basically, cutting a loud fart in the art house in a lot of ways. It's basically, we're going to shit on some China dinnerware here. And we're going to make you pay $8 to watch us.
Yeah.
There's some balls to that. And I definitely like that.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that Norton and Brad Pitt.
They're very, very good. All three of the leads are really incredible, and they're all great characters, whether it's the narrator, Tyler Durden, or Marla. I think that this is also a testament to how good Helen Bonham Carter, because there's a lot of ways that character could have been portrayed, and it would have been very ugly. Some people call this film very misogynistic, and they might be right. I think Carter brings a lot of gravitas and a lot of anger and a lot of guts to that kind of role, and it's really neat to watch.
I don't think you can call a movie about misogyny misogynistic. This is examining sort of male energy.
I think it's being very critical of it.
And so is it? I don't know. I don't know if you can let them have their cake and eat it too, but I would defend it. I would say, there's some raunchy sex scenes, and men are portrayed as apes, but it may not be an honest portrayal, but it's closer to honest than a lot of movies
There's huge truthful elements to this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you could also argue there's some cartoonish elements to it, but
no, I don't think that the thing to do would be to go, erase all of the movies in the library or, ejaculate in the clam chowder soup in the fancy restaurants. As fun as that might be.
Or splice in a large schlong in a kid's movie.
Exactly. I don't know how that makes the world better in any way.
It doesn't.
I
honestly think it's a big coming out movie or a guy struggling with his homosexuality. But
I think it's about a guy struggling to find his identity, yes. But I don't know if I agree with you that it's
I don't think it's a happy ending for Marla and our narrator. I think that it's going to end badly.
And I'm sorry, like I said, the ending just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It feels weirdly
allegedly there is a sequel out in comic book form now where it shows the narrator once again married to Marla, but their marriage is on the rocks. It's not going well. And Durden,
I'm not going to fall over myself to go seek out a copy of that. Yeah. And it always bothered me. Norton symbolically shoots himself through the mouth.
Yeah.
And that kills the Brad Pitt character. But he survived. Edward Norton survives the gunshot.
Yeah.
And even if I go with the movie to say you can shoot yourself through the mouth and survive, which you can, he's not going to be walking and talking.
Yeah.
Afterwards, he's not going to be doing anything but laying on the floor screaming and bleeding. Like, the fact that he has a one-liner before the credits roll and he's holding his face together and, the ending of the movie just doesn't really make a lot of sense. It feels right.
I buy the suspension of disbelief.
It gets there, the movie gets there, but I think that it undermines how some of the stuff they're talking about, especially the first half of the movie, really felt relevant and real and smart. And then the movie kind of turns into a music video for the third act. It's kind of disappointing to me. But it's still amazing, and everybody should watch it. The suppressed life that he was living may not have been as exciting as the Tyler Durden life, but nor was it as damaging to him and the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So, is the Fight Club something that you want? Well, maybe the Fight Club is something that you want, but don't need. I don't know. There's stuff to think about in this movie, and like I say, please watch Fight Club.
It's good.
All right. Well,
now to my favorite part of the podcast.
That is 6 You So Crazy Director Masterclass movies that have been reviewed.
I feel like we're going to throw down on this list.
I
think that there's going to be some genuine disagreements here, but all right.
Well, so be it. I'm ready for it. I can hack it.
Yeah, all right.
What was your least favorite of these 6 movies?
Well, I think you and I are going to agree on the least favorite, and that would be Manhunter. Okay. It's probably the weakest out of the two. It just suffers from, I guess the 80 cheese and style. It's a classic example of, film very stuck in its generation, and that hurts it, and also some weak performances. So that's number 6, I do believe.
All right.
Here we go, though. Shallow Grave is next.
Number 5?
Number 5. The story is not original. We've seen this story before, I think, in that regards. The acting is really well done. You can clearly tell a very talented filmmaker did it. It's just that we've seen the story before, and also one thing that I think hurts it from being a very amazing thriller is that all the lead characters that we're going for are unsympathetic. I think they had to make one of them truly sympathetic. It came close with the.
We were rooting for Ewan McGregor, but
if that's
sort of I guess the most charming of the 3.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to have, Shallow Grave as number 5. And like I said, these are all very, very good films. Number 4 is Blue Velvet. I think just the fact that Blue Velvet takes a little more chances than, say, Shallow Grave did. I will always give extra points for trying something original, even if you fall flat on your face.
Right.
And I mean, I think of Southland Empire. I don't think it's
Inland Empire, yeah.
or not Inland Empire, but Southland Tales.
Southland Tales, right?
I will never condemn you to being one of the worst movies ever because you tried something new, whether it's with the medium of sequence of time or performance or style or whatever. And it also, there's a genuine, it creates a genuine fear and dread. There's something about it. There's something primal about Blue Velvet and what Lynch did and the nature of evil that it stays with you. It was the film that did stay with me. It's always stayed with me after I've seen it, I think, like now 4 or 5 times now. And it stays with you after a while. And you have to acknowledge that fact. It does, whether you agree or not with its depiction of S&M, it stays there. The images stay there. The choices that just kind of register. Memento would be next. Memento, I guess, would be number 3. Once again, it's sort of got that original take where it's playing with the narrative of time and also of sequence. It's a gimmick movie. Guy Pearce is very, very good. All of them are very, very solid. I even love the colors that Nolan uses as well. It's good. So number 3 would be Memento. I forgot how good, like all around good, amazing cast there was in Shutter Island, which is number 2. It's a well-made gothic thriller that's sort of got dipped its hand in those 1940 Universal monster movies almost, just with the setting. Very gothic. I love the fact that a lot of the violence is implied in Shutter Island. I mean, there are scenes of violence.
There's some grisliness to it.
There is some grisliness to it, but a lot of the violence is sort of seen off screen, even up until the end. We never, thankfully, see the after effects of the murder of the kids. Still horrifying.
Yeah.
It's what's implied in a lot of ways with Shutter Island, and it's so well made, so well paced. It's good, and features, I think, probably one of the best performances of DiCaprio's film career. It's a really good, genuine, really good performance. I argue that he's given many before that. Would I call him this generation's Brando? No, but that's for another day. And last but not least,
Fight Club's all the way at the top.
This film had balls. It really, really did. It's an uncomfortable movie, and it knows it. Love the fact that it was pushing buttons. There's no other film quite like it. I sort of, kind of at least argue with the fact, like, what's a film that you could wrestle? It's original in a lot of ways. I love the sarcastic sense of humor of this film. It's very anti-capitalist nature, or at least the trappings of it. The characters are bugged out insane. It's a very talented person made this movie. I agree with you. The first hour is better than the second, but there's no other film quite like it. It rattled people.
Well, and if you piss people off, if you incite that sort of thing, you've hit a nerve. You've done something.
It gets away with it. Yeah. It explains where it's coming from. You don't have to like the opening or the main characters. In fact, I think it's sort of encouraging you not to. Or if you do, you maybe need to take a long pause and examine, your life and decisions. But like I said, there's so many balls that are thrown up in the air of this movie on so many levels that it manages to catch most of them. I agree that there's a lot of suspension of disbelief you have to have with, this movie. But does that make it, not even a classic film? Because in a lot of classic movies, there's going to be huge suspension of disbelief. Star Wars, great movie, but a lot of suspension of disbelief. Yeah. So I guess that doesn't bother me. The performances of both Edward Norton and Brad Pitt and really, I think the true star of the movie is Helena Bonham Carter, because she managed to make a very difficult character very three-dimensional. I don't know. And the movie, it did slap me in the face. I still remember, I didn't go opening night, but, the night I saw everything about that night, I remember seeing Fight Club for the first time, and it'd been a long while since I'd watched a movie and just kind of went, wow. Yeah. And there it was. So.
Number 1, Fight Club.
Yep.
All right. Well, we do have fairly different lists, but I don't know if we're going to have any, big screaming matches over it. I agree with you that number 6 is Manhunter.
Yeah.
I think what you see in Manhunter is sort of Michael Mann exploring his best and worst impulses.
Yes.
And the good stuff, like I said, was the characterization of sort of the driven police investigative procedural angle.
He seems to be very much in love with that.
And the other stuff, the sort of soaking in the scenery and the sort of romantic subplot with the serial killer, didn't work as much. And I really felt the signature style that was so big for Mann, especially when he established himself in the 80s in his Miami Vice days or whatever, actually has turned around and bit him on the ass now. Because I found a lot of those music video sequences just brought the movie to a dead stop. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. So number 6, Manhunter. Yeah. Number 5 is Blue Velvet. It's, like I said, the most mainstream, or the first time mainstream kind of really embraced Lynch. Mm-hmm. And it's a very Lynchian Lynch movie, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's not one of his, less
You can definitely tell he made his movie.
Yeah. And for being the first of its kind and for making an impression, like you say. Mm-hmm. As troubling as some of that stuff is, the sort of ugly sexuality of the movie, perversion stuff is, it sticks with you. You remember scenes from this movie. It has some staying power in your brain, whether you want it to or not. Mm-hmm. So it again, there was some effective scenes in this movie, but there was also, like in most, if not all, David Lynch movies,
I think Lynch is
fat to be trimmed. So the next two on the list were tricky for me. I went back and forth on it. Yeah. But in the end, I put Shallow Grave at number 4. Yeah. These two movies have in common that there's basically no likable characters at the end of the day for either of them. Yeah. And again, for me, that can be problematic. Yeah. I find the performances really strong in Shallow Grave.
They're really, really good, all across the board.
To see Danny Boyle flexing his muscles right out of the gate here, I mean, this is an entertaining movie. Yeah. It is a familiar movie, like we've said, but it is entertaining.
And it's a very lean film. There's a lot of fat that is trimmed. It's a very lean thriller.
It's well executed, and it's a great popcorn date movie too. Yeah. It's not, again, I characterize these characters as fairly unlikable, but it's not like we're asked to sort of embrace their evil lifestyle. We're just sort of given a window into them, and the movie has such a light, fun energy to it, considering how sinister the story is, that it'll race you to the end. And then number 3 is Memento. Yeah. Again, it's. A lot of it is the technique of the way they tell the story. Mm-hmm. The story itself, bare bones, not that amazing, but the way the story is told, and in particular the wrinkle of the slow reveal of the Stephen Tobolowsky angle, what this case study character really represents. Yeah. I think that pays off well in the movie. Yeah. So in the end, if you're watching a bunch of bugs drown in the toilet, at least it was entertaining. Yeah. Well played. Yeah. At number 2, I put the Fight Club. Yeah. I think we had a huge conversation about it. I don't know how much more I really want to say. Yeah. I really like Lynch, and even before Fight Club came out, he'd already established himself for me as a guy. If he makes a movie, I will get around to seeing it. Yeah. And
you mean Fincher.
Fincher, pardon me. Did I say Lynch?
You did.
Fincher, if he makes a movie, I'm going to see it. Some of his movies I like more than others. Yeah. And this ranks high in his catalog, but I don't think it's the top. So, by all means, see and enjoy Fight Club. And it's a conversation starter.
It is. I think some people will either like really, really love it or really, really disturbed by it.
Controversially, I'm putting Shutter Island at number 1 out of this list of movies. It's kind of surprises me, and in a way, I'm a little bit skeptical because it's also the most recent of the movies. So, in a way, my experience of it. I mean, I guess I rewatched the movies before, but this hasn't been able to sit with me as long as some of these other ones. And so who knows how time will be these. I find period pieces tend to age better. Yeah. Because they are, by their nature, designed to be
period pieces. I mean, yeah.
But I think what we see here is Scorsese flexing his muscles and putting it into a thriller horror movie context. Yeah. So it's one of my favorite directors doing one of my favorite genres. Okay.
I love one of the many things.
There you go.
There's so much that we didn't talk about Shutter Island in a lot of ways of what makes that movie tick. I love the fact that I think it's every time that you see fire, he's in the fantasy world, and every time you see water, he's in reality. Right. There's so many great things going on in that film.
This movie may not be as ambitious as some of the other movies in the list, particularly Fight Club and Memento, but it's just really good at being what it is. Yeah. Again, I think what makes a lot of these twist movies work is if the movie didn't have a twist.
Yeah.
If the movie really was about a guy coming to this asylum trying to find a missing person, and there was a big scheme to try and keep him out of the loop, it would still work. Because of the cast and because of Scorsese, it would still work. The twist actually gives it that sort of extra punch.
Yeah.
But
it definitely makes it rewatchable.
The whole movie, like, it all fits together perfectly.
I guess another thing about Shutter Island that I call the little critical, I guess I sort of figured out halfway through. If you haven't figured out that, he's an inmate at the halfway point, because I think it shows its hand early.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
There's a classic story, and I read it when I was young, and I wish I could remember the name of the original author. Yeah. It's a fairly familiar conceit, but there's a storm, and they pull up to this hospital, and people are being weird treated by the staff, and you find out what's happened is that the inmates took over the asylum. The staff has all been long dead, and they've been living there and posing as staff members. And that's kind of where I was starting to think with Shutter Island, just because of the strangeness of everyone else's behavior. Again, I try not to overthink it when I watch these movies, because if you spend the whole movie trying to figure it out, you kind of take yourself out of the movie as a consequence. So.
That's a pretty terrifying consequence. If little twist is where all the people are.
Everybody.
The inmates are running the asylum, literally. It's a pretty terrifying, and you've now sort of essentially gone into the middle of it.
Yeah. And there it was, episode 24 is behind us. If you would like to write, rank, and review, and let your host Larry Parsons know just exactly what you think of him, you can do so at rankandreview@gmail.com. That's RANKNREVIEW@gmail.com. We also have a presence on Facebook, although that is Rank and Review, not Rank and Review. So feel free to find that and like it, and please keep listening, keep telling your friends. Thank you so much.